Are you living like God owns everything? Or are you living like you own everything? Living the life that God has always intended begins with a foundational biblical reality. God owns everything. We own nothing. Each week you gather your congregation to worship, to grow, know, then go to participate in God's redemptive plan to restore all things. Last week, you led your congregation into the adventure of living the giving life by the giving of their time, skills, and giftedness. This week's sermon will encourage your congregation to take the next step on this life-giving journey to the giving of some of their material resources. I'm confident that every person in your congregation believes that God owns everything. Well, if this is true, if we genuinely believe that God owns everything, why then are we so obsessed with owning things? Why are we driven to own even one thing to claim as mine? Why are we driven to own things that aren't even ours? Why would we rather take than give? My point is this. This obsession to own things is the very thing that is keeping us from experiencing God's supreme contentment, His deep joy, His happiness, keeping us from knowing God's perfect shalom, from living the life that God has always intended for us to live. This sermon asks, are we living like God owns everything? Or are we living like we own everything? In this sermon, the people in your congregation will discover a foundational, biblical reality. God owns everything. It all belongs to God. It's all His. It's not mine. No thing is mine. There is not one square inch of the creation, not a single fiber of our human existence over which Christ does not cry, mine. You may think this sounds disheartening or demoralizing. Not so. You see, this redeeming reality frees us from the need to own anything. Rather, we are released from the need to be a taker, freed to be a giver, freed to be a servant of God's generosity, freed to give joyfully and zealously, freed to be God's divine accomplices in the renewal of all things, freed to live the life that God has always intended for us to live, freed to take hold of the life that is truly life. I refer you to 1 Timothy chapter 6, verses 17 through 19. In last week's sermon, you told your people that one takes hold of the life that is truly life by excelling in the grace of giving. Yet, it's not possible to excel in this grace, nor take hold of that life, until we are gripped by the supreme sacrifice of Christ, until we let Christ take hold of us. You ended last week's sermon with a call to action, inviting others to find ways to practice the grace of giving without money, being generous with their thoughts, words, time, attention, and influence. I hope this past week has been a time of joyful celebration because your congregation was filling the earth with the glory of God by the giving of their thoughts and their words and their influence. While most Christians profess that God owns everything, few have actually allowed this truth to change the way they live. The fact that you will be teaching this week is God owns everything. We own nothing. Until this fact begins to affect our personal values and priorities, it sits unused, sits in the minds of most people. When we give, we are fully and joyously participating as God's divine accomplices in His plan to bring unity to all things in heaven and on earth under Christ. I refer you to Ephesians chapter 1, verse 10. You see, heaven and earth come together again. God's throne and His footstool are reunited. Once again, we will have a cosmic temple. All of creation will be full of the glory of God. People in your congregation have the creative capacity and the charge to give as God gives, dispensing the sacrificial grace of God to flourish those around us by being supremely and lavishly generous with their God-given time, talent, resources, and money. Pastor, you can grow and mature your people in this grace of giving, a grace that has already been given to them by God. So God bless you as you inspire, challenge, and teach the people in your congregation to excel in this grace. Teach your people to let go of those things that keep them from living the life God intends.